Hello world and welcome to the video. This is the first episode of the Wake Up Weekly Roundup, which is a new podcast, and I'm just going to keep diving forward because this is not going to be more than 10 minutes. If you see me looking down, it is because there's a timer going, and I just thought that'd be a fun little twist. So what is a Wake Up Weekly Roundup? It is a weekly podcast. We'll be touching on some big moments that happened in the news, but like in a calm and earnest way, with like a little bit of humor, but a lot of like authenticity. I want it to feel like accessible, where we actually get into what is happening. Like, this incident is happening with the president, go figure. And we're confused about like what's the truth, and we just want to get into that and the impacts of that and how it makes us feel, for example. So that's what we'll be doing here on the Wake Up Weekly Roundup. The Wake Up Weekly Roundup is replacing Wake Up the Daily Show, and if you have any questions about that, there is a new video that is up on my YouTube called like The End of Wake Up or something like that. That kind of explains why the podcast is happening and why the Daily Show is not happening. But for all intents and purposes, this is the podcast. And for the first episode today, we'll be talking about... what are we going to talk about? I already talked about what the podcast is. Well, there goes my first segment. And then we're going to talk about... is the president mentally ill, and is that conversation serving us? And then we're going to talk, maybe if we have time, about the presidential candidates and like my personal opinions. So let's get into it, shall we? What is the Wake Up Weekly Roundup? Cool. Awesome. I really want to have like a cover of Woody's Roundup. It's like, Wake Up Weekly Roundup. Come on, gather round. The best podcast in the... You know what I mean? But we'll get there. This podcast is only on YouTube right now. It's a VODCAST. But, maybe I'll put it on IGTV. I want to put it on Spotify and iTunes and wherever you listen to podcasts. So I can say you can listen to this on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. But you have to have an RSS feed. And I have $0. Which is a whole separate issue in my life right now. So if you want to pay $10 a month to get me an RSS feed for this podcast, hit me up. I would love to have that happen for me. And then you will be able to listen to the podcasts on iTunes and Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts. But until then, it's just on YouTube. And it was made so like you don't have to see the video. Like, I'm not going to do visual aids, but some people like to look at my face, and I want to like give you that option, you know? Like, for example, I really like to look at my face, which is why if I'm looking over here, I'm actually looking at myself, and I'm looking down here, I'm looking at the fact that we are 3 minutes into this podcast, so we got to keep going. Okay, the big thing that I want to talk about today is a conversation that's happening a lot right now that has happened repeatedly since the 2016 elections, before the votes even happened and like the campaigns were happening, and it's about Donald Trump being mentally ill. He recently took a Sharpie to a NOAA diagram of a storm to make it reach Alabama, because he said multiple times it was going to hit Alabama, and instead of admitting he was wrong, he wanted to do that. So it's called Sharpie Gate, and Sharpie Gate has inspired a lot of the discussion once again of like if the president is mentally ill. And I have thoughts. One, I don't think he is mentally ill. And I think that when we say that he's mentally ill, it does two things. One, it's disrespectful to people with actual like mental health things that they are trying to work through, and society's understanding of that, because mental health is complex and nuanced and impacts people in a lot of different ways. And when we just like take someone's problem behavior and immediately call that a mental illness, I think it says more about the fact that we think that mental illnesses of any kind are like, you know, if anyone does anything wrong, they're mentally ill. And that tells people also that if someone has a mental health issue that they want to discuss, that like they are wrong. And that's just not true. The other thing that it does is it doesn't allow us to talk about actual solutions to the president's behavior when we write it off as a mental health issue just because it's easier for us to do that. So why do I not think the president is mentally ill? Because, as I've said many times, in-person conversations, I think I've had this conversation so many times because I'm very passionate about this, that like the president's behavior is not unusual. It's not something that we have never seen before. Like not if any of us, literally every one of us, tragically, knows somebody who has such a big ego, is so toxically masculine, that they believe they are never wrong, that they believe they must always be right, that everybody is below them, and they will do whatever lying, stupid things they can to make that true for them. Like, we know people like that. You know an asshole. I know an asshole. We all know an asshole. A lot of the times, this personality is like the people who bullied us in school, or like who like cause drama in your hometown, even though they're like 45, like they need to calm down. They need to like check themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And I really hate that we're like, oh, this is mental illness, because it's a totally different solution if it was a mental illness than the reality, which is like, this is a man who has always been rich, has been handed money, has been handed opportunities after opportunities, and he has ruined them over and over, but keeps getting more because he is so privileged. His ego is so big. Nobody tells this man no. Like, his version of reality, he has the money and privilege to create, and nobody checks him on that. And the problem with us not acknowledging that is that we then don't put limits on our president. And so we see him continuing to do the same behavior he's done since the campaign trail, since before he's even announced his campaign, when he was like making up lies about President Barack Obama. Like, he keeps doing things over and over, and debatably they get worse. And then we don't put limits on him. We never punish him. There are no consequences. And then we're like, oh, why does he keep doing this? Not that it's right for him to not know that this is wrong, but from a behavioral standpoint, if you're doing something and people are like, oh no, but they never actually give you any consequences, you subconsciously or consciously are being told that what you're doing is okay. And so, yeah, like, he is bad, but also other people are also responsible. And I think that's why we want to write it off as a mental illness. One, because it's a lot more complex to like admit the truth, but also because we want a very black and white picture that like he is wrong and we are all right. But he is wrong, and also people who are in power who can hold him accountable and are not are also wrong. Like Nancy Pelosi not following through on any actual consequences is not just complicit, but like actively enabling this, because there are a few people who can give him consequences, who can stop this behavior and show him that there are ramifications for your actions. And when they don't use that power, they're screwing us all over. So I hope that makes sense. The president is not mentally ill. He just is an egotistical a-hole, and nobody is giving him any consequences. So surprise, surprise, he's going to keep doing the bad things. We now only have a minute left in the podcast, so I guess I won't get into the presidential candidates during this one, but I'm sure there will be a lot more opportunities to do that. I hope that you enjoyed this first episode. I hope that it was educational. I liked finally being able to tell you all this. Yes. We could get into more nuance, but don't really feel like we need to. I feel like it's there. If you have any thoughts on this, tell me in the comments below. I will reply as long as they are thoughtful and interesting and not just telling me to go die in a gas chamber. Yep. That's all. I need a good sign off for this. I would say, go subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, but I can't. So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube so you can get this and all the other content that I may or may not be creating. I love you. And by you, I mean like the spirit of you in which you give me. Thanks for watching. Bye.